This is the Pro Audio Suite podcast. Quick Bites.
Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite Quick Bite. This week, we're talking about hearing or lack thereof, and also a new set of headphones.
Pardon?
Yeah,
Hello?
exactly.
Of course, Robert. Had to start right off.
What was there? I mean, I had to bite my tongue, let's be honest.
This could have been a 10-minute gag with that as the punchline, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But now hearing is an issue, and next year we're going to be talking to an audiologist about losing your hearing as you get older and damage we do with headphones or whatever, and also the mystery one of tinnitus. I have a theory, but I don't think it's necessarily going to work, but worth a shot anyway. But you do have a theory on tinnitus, don't you, Robert?
I have many theories. I think we all have this theory that everyone has a little bit of it, and they just maybe don't want to admit it, but just living life, especially in this city and whatnot, you're going to end up with hearing damage, and it's the main way that results is with tinnitus. And so I think everyone has it to some degree. Obviously, some people worse than others, and it can be for sure insanely maddening, I imagine, because it's, in case anybody isn't aware, it's essentially the sensation that you're hearing a frequency, but it doesn't exist, and you cannot get rid of hearing that frequency. You can plug your ears and do whatever you want, but it just won't go away. And for that reason, it drives people mad.
That tone is a popular effect in films. Like they'll have a scene where there's an explosion or like a fire of a really loud gun, and the sound mixer will do that effect to make you feel like you're having tinnitus. It's pretty interesting when they do it. And they'll cut all the audio. Maybe they'll high pass or actually low pass.
They'll put a low pass. Yeah,
they'll low pass everything out,
and then
they'll leave behind
this
tone, to emulate what it feels like, to have hearing damage.
And graphically, they'll often accompany that with a muting of the colors.
Whoa, yeah.
Ah, okay.
It's very effective.
Which is something else that happens, yeah.
It is. And I don't know like if there's temporary, like, because you definitely get that, that ringing, and then if anybody's gone to a concert and you didn't wear any hearing protection, your ears will ring, and that is tinnitus, and then it kind of goes away and it subsides later. But eventually it can be permanent, and that's specifically, I guess, what tinnitus is the permanent aspect of that. But
yeah, because I spoke to you, Robert, about this a couple of weeks back, and I had a theory based on noise-cancelling headphones that if you could work out what the frequency was that was in your brain that was, going ballistic and keeping you awake at night, could you not?
And I said you can't cancel something that doesn't exist. The cancellation
It's not something physical,
relies on physical interaction, and so you're like, but based on that, you should just be able to plug your ears and cancel out or block the tinnitus. But
yeah, isn't it because a snapped nerve end inside your ear?
Yeah, right. So inside your cochlea, there's all these, like your cochlea is like a snail, and it spirals in, and towards the very tight, small part of that is where the high frequencies are perceived. And there's these little hairs that are on the end of the hair is a nerve cell, I think. And so as the hair gets moved, because the frequency is so high that it can make it into that deep part of the cochlea, that hair cell is excited, and then the nerve says, that frequency is happening. And what happens is these hairs get flattened out or broken, and therefore the nerve is like constantly being actuated, I guess. And so that's that feeling that you're hearing when it's not really a frequency. It's just a nerve that's busted.
Well, we'll find out some more when we get our audiologist to come in and talk more about that, because it is a fascinating thing, and also hearing damage, basically. I mean, and
it's a very important subject too. So yeah, actually, there's a good story about this that I have. About a year ago, I was I've got a pair of Magnapanner speakers here, and they've got a 5-foot long ribbon tweeter, and they're just wonderful speakers. And I was having a problem with the ribbon tweeters, and so I was running like 18K tone into the speaker, and I had to get really close to the speaker to hear it. And I think I was also cranking the volume up to some degree. And I'm doing my thing, and then my daughter, who's 30 feet away in her bedroom, says, "Turn it off." I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I press the producer button, and I don't really turn it off. I'm like, okay. And like 30 seconds later, she's like, "Turn it off." Like, okay. I'm like, oh, you really do hear that. And I was amazed, because for me, if I backed off 10 feet from that speaker even, like the drop off was significant. It just, dropped fast. And she was, I mean, if I went to her room, it was gone. I did not hear it anymore. And she was picking that up. And it's just like amazing what young ears can hear.
Yeah.
And I never really saw that like truly, because it was just amazing. I was like, wow.
I had to look up exactly what the description of, tinnitus is and what it is. And it's actually that those little tiny hairs inside the cochlea. So the microscopic hairs form a fringe on the surface of each auditory cell in the cochlea. And if hairs are damaged, they move randomly, then sending into electrical impulses to your brain as noise or tinnitus. It can also be caused by turbulence in the carotid artery or jugular vein. That's pretty interesting. Or if you have TMJ issues, can also cause it.
Well, there you go. Robert, you get a gold star.
Well done, sir.
I learned it in college. Actually, in college we had to learn about the ear and everything. And I did music composition. And one of our teachers, an amazing guy named Dr. Cleve Scott, he wrote this piece of music that relied on beat frequencies. So, George, you're familiar with beat frequencies, right? So, anyways, my teacher wrote this piece of music that relies on beat frequencies, which beat frequencies are, you have two frequencies that are very close to each other. And the difference between them creates a third frequency. Like literally in the physical world, there's a third frequency, which is the two signals beating against each other, the subtraction of the two. But what he did is he wrote this piece of music where the two sides were fed to you fairly discreetly. So one ear was hearing, for the most part, one frequency, and the other ear was hearing the other frequency, and your brain created the third frequency. It was this thing that they couldn't get rid of. Like no matter how they turned their head or moved around, it was inside their head. They almost felt violated. And that's the one thing that makes me think maybe it's possible to psychoacoustically eliminate tinnitus in some way, because the fact that your brain created a beat frequency, maybe your brain can phase something out.
Wow.
Oh, that's deep, man.
My gut says that it's not possible, that tinnitus the frequency doesn't exist in the real world, so you can't get rid of it. But
Yeah, but then again, that beat frequency didn't exist either.
Exactly. So maybe there is some crazy way to.
I wonder if that's different from the beat frequency. There's another kind I was thinking of. My uncle used to have a twin-engined plane. And if the two engines were running slightly different RPMs, it resonated in this pulsing sound inside the cabin.
That's a beat frequency.
Oh my God, it was so intense. It was horrible. And he would have to very carefully tune that. There was like a synchronizer or something that would try to get the two engines to spin at the same speed. But it was fascinating. Like when they were just barely off of each other, it would just sort of go, just like you're describing.
It's like I think there's other things called like wolf tones. I mean, you can almost do it if you whistle like
Mongolian throat singing almost.
Oh, the throat singers?
Yeah, you can create a third frequency out of two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Audio-wise, the brain does a lot of interesting things. I mean, you've probably done this too, Robert, is sometimes if you've got a pop or a click or something in a voice track, you can actually, if it's only like less than, a frame or two, sometimes you can cut it out. But even though there's a tiny gap, the brain doesn't hear that. It's just too fast, so your brain just skips over it.
The brain fills in so much stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, as like a music mixer, everyone knows that you can like kind of crank up the high end of a kick drum, and it makes your brain think there's low end with it, even though it's not there. Your brain's like, I heard the attack, and I know that comes with this thud, and your brain fills in the thud, but it's not really there. That's what I think that's a lot of what that Max Bass plugin does with waves. So anyways, yeah, you can fake low end presence with with high end being constructed right. Another thing they've proven is like if you chop the transient, the initial sound off of something, people can't tell if it's a trumpet or a piano, kind of, because so much information is in the transient.
Wow.
And not the tail. So your brain is deriving information and using its knowledge of what it's heard before to figure out what it thinks it's hearing now. And that's how it knows that this is a trumpet and that's this. It's also how your brain knows if something's in front of it or behind it, because your ears are only really engineered to hear left and right. But if you slice someone's ear flaps off, they start to have trouble figuring out front and back because your ear flap and the shape of that is really like your brain knows that something from behind me is going to have fewer high frequencies.
Yeah,
but it only knows that it's fewer high frequencies because it knows what that thing should sound like in the first place.
Actually, I know someone who we could get to test that on, slicing off their ear flaps to see if they they obviously don't use them. So it's kind of a redundant.
Don't do this at home.
Didn't we talk about cats in the last episode?
Well, it's quite funny with the brain though, because if you want to ever copy an image, if you're a painter or a drawer or whatever, if you turn the image upside down, it tricks the brain. The brain doesn't, like filling in all the gaps. It actually has to see the image for what it is.
That's right.
A really
that's like
trick.
a famous thing when you want to draw something accurately. They did this to us in college. I started out freshman year as an architecture school, and they would have you draw something. And when you're looking at the face right side up and trying to draw the person, you are horrible.
Yeah.
And then you flip this picture upside down so that you can't really tell what you're looking at, and you just try to emulate what you're seeing, and you make a way better copy of it than when you know what you're copying.
There's another way that's a little bit more related to our business, which is MP3. The reason MP3 is smaller is because they remove all of the parts of the audio that are deemed to be not necessary for your brain to determine that you're hearing the original sound.
Yeah.
And I still don't even understand how they figured out how to do this back in the late 80s, early 90s. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It's research that came from even the 30s with
masking.
They did a lot of research on what tones mask other tones, and so if this tone and this frequency is present, you're not going to, at this volume, you're not going to hear that frequency at this volume. So we can get rid of that. That was a big part of it.
It is computationally intensive. I mean, I remember when I was a freshman in college, 92, I think it was. MP3 was really new, and you could run a command line thing and DOS on the PC. And, turn a wave into an MP3, you'd go to dinner and come back to make an MP3.
Yeah.
I mean, computationally, it's very complicated. Now we record direct into MP3 on a phone and don't even think about it.
And stream it in real time.
Yeah, it's quite complicated, but that's a really good example of how the brain, fills in data or...
Right. And it's using multiple technologies. Like there's the AAC codec, and then I think there's the AAC Plus, or what was it, where it was basically playing with high frequency noise to, I'd have to read back up on it, but it wasn't just all the normal stuff that MP3 did, but they combined it with the ability to sort of add in this high frequency noise when necessary to make you feel that those frequencies were present, I think.
Wow. So we're always going to have better...
Because a lot of these compression techniques they're all borrowing from each other and combining,
So is that similar to like Renaissance bass plugin and all that sort of stuff that adds bottom end?
Yeah, so Renaissance bass and things like that don't really add bottom end in the true energies point of view. What they do is they add in the high frequency content that would normally be present with that low end. And so your brain goes, I heard this, it must have that, the low end, even though that low end really isn't there. And so it's like your brain filling in the gaps.
It's not a bass synthesizer. It's not something that's like taking a tone and doubling it on a lower octave or something.
Yeah, that's really clever.
Wow.
This is the whole thing why like kick drums have a lot of like snappy click into them, because it's like that transient is associated with this, and it's kind of your 80s kick drum sound, but psychoacoustic games.
Wow. Now, I was going to talk about these Neura headphones or Neurophones.
I was going to mention that. I'm very curious to hear those.
Have you seen them before, George? Because I remember you mentioning some headphones that you'd seen at NAMM or AES or somewhere.
I haven't seen them in the flesh or held them in the flesh. They're prosumery headphones, I guess. I mean, they're definitely marketed to the consumer. I would be shocked if they didn't show up at NAMM or something. If they're in the real world now, which I think they are. Weren't they sort of a...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's very fascinating technology, the way it modifies the response by sending sound into your ear canal, reflecting off your eardrum, and measuring the response of the eardrum and then using that to modify the response of the drivers. I mean, internally.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. I was trying to get the guys on the show today, but we'll get them for next year because they're actually based in Melbourne.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, it's an Australian company. So
also known as the asshole of the world. Sorry, what was that?
Was that my outside voice?
yeah. Good on you, Roland.
Hey, listen, while we're talking about headphones too, I'd like to give a personal shout out to the people at Stax and just say that if there's a spare pair of SR009s floating around, you can shoot them my way. Sydney, not Melbourne.
I've heard one of the people that works there who could help you out does need a kidney donated, so you may be able to do a deal.
It'd be about equal value, right?
Man, before we started recording today, Robert was talking about them, and I jumped online and had a look and saw the price and nearly fell off my chair. You're lucky I'm still here and not in the back of an ambulance somewhere.
Well, those are pretty cheap compared to the Sennheiser Orpheus.
Really?
Oh, there's more expensive than the Stax. I didn't know that.
Oh, the Orpheus comes with its own amp. It's about $70,000 system.
Whoa!
And, the Stax have their own amp too, by the way, but they're only $5,000.
No, the Orpheus is sort of like the, well, if you'll spend $10,000 on headphones, surely you'll spend $70,000 on headphones.
Who does spend $70,000 on headphones? Please, someone tell me.
Someone who's lived long enough to make $70,000 yet can't hear what those headphones can do because they've lived that long.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's crazy.
That's nuts.
By the time you got $70,000 to chuck on a pair of headphones, you're probably about 80. And you've got no hearing anyway, so what's the point?
That's right.
Exactly. I mean,
it's probably Silicon Valley
I had the pleasure of listening to a pair of Stax when I was 20 years old, and I have to say it was just awesome. Like, do they still call them head speakers? Like they were. I remember at one time they were fairly adamant.
No, they've got headphones here.
Headphone.
They call them headphones here, but head speakers. As we said before the show, I think that's really cool because headphone has that sort of dingy, telephony sound connotation. So head speakers is really clever. Good marketing.
Yeah.
I know Blue made a pair of headphones around 2014, and the guy was going around AES playing them, and they sounded pretty fabulous. And I remember that they were pretty big, but they were multi-driver. So I think they had literally they were a 3-way headphone, which also AKG made a pair of 3-way headphones. But these ones from Blue had their own amp, I believe. And I remember trying them, and granted, I was listening on a noisy convention floor, but they sounded pretty good. 3-way headphones. Most headphones obviously are just 1-way.
Well, I found the info about the ones I heard at AES called I think I mentioned these. I couldn't remember the name. They're the RAAL ribbon headphone. I was saying I put them on backwards, and I was embarrassed. I had them on backwards.
Yes, that's right. And Stevie Wonder
was right next to me, and he saw my headphones and laughed. These are RAAL ribbon drivers headphones. Definitely the definition of a head-worn speaker. If you saw these things, I'll send you guys a link to them.
Well, they're kind of Stax-like, if I remember right. They're just like these big panels,
huge panels with
big black panels,
carbon fiber fins on them, and they look steampunk almost. These things.
Yeah, as we were saying before the show, imagine walking in, there's your 5-year-old, sucking on chocolate fingers, wearing headphones, watching Bob the Builder.
Yeah, that's right.
So here's one other thing I remember reading about. I've never experienced this, but they were trying to work with placed sound. And so they had 2 extremely high frequency beams of sound that were sort of focused to cross at a point, say 20 feet in front of you. And when they crossed, they would beat against each other, and the beating, so these 2 frequencies were so high that you can't hear them. But when they hit each other, the difference drops down into the audio range. And you have sound happening at a place where there's no speaker.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's so clever.
Yeah, it's really... I've never actually experienced it. It was just some things I was reading about.
Wow.
It's wow. Holographic sound,
There you go.
Wow.
There's some clever people out there, and it's certainly not me.
Right.
Along
with the brown tone. We all know about that one too, right?
Brown tone.
Don't go there.
You haven't heard of
Disco
this?
dump.
The U.S. military.
Yeah, this is the one that's so low it makes you shit your pants, yeah.
Exactly.
They used to use the low frequencies in, to send either in war,
Right.
Fire up the low frequency.
They would try to find the frequency that most people's body resonated at. And so they just blast you with the sound until your guts are just vibrating. And next thing you know, you just...
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Something like 14 hertz or something like that.
I'm sure it does.
Like makes you sick. Like enough volume at that low frequency. It's literally like being shaken.
Yep.
Well, on that bombshell, we should...
We should be out.
Yeah, we should get out of here. Yeah. All right.
All
on that
right.
note.
My phone's exploding.
Yeah. Well, thank God it's just your phone.
Oh, we're such a tasteful show.
That was the Pro Audio Suite. If you have any questions or ideas for a show, let us know via our Facebook, the Pro Audio Suite Podcast.
Yeah.